Hello everyone. Ni here. Today we will be discussing about conflict management. Since we are working with so many people on daily basis, it may happen that there may arise conflict between two people. Thus, knowing this topic is important. Let's go through the slide of agenda which shows that we are covering definition, theories, process, and types, and quickly move to the definition. Conflict is a process that begins when one party perceives that another party has negatively affected, or is about to negatively affect, something that the first party cares about. It is the practice of being able to identify and handle conflicts sensibly, fairly, and efficiently. Since conflicts in a business are a natural part of the workplace, it is important that there are people who understand conflicts and know how to resolve them. This is important in today's market more than ever. Everyone is striving to show how valuable they are to the company they work for, and at times, this can lead to disputes with other members of the team. Let's go to the next slide. Transition of conflict thought. Here explain the three different views on organizational conflicts. With continuous studies and researches in the field of organizational behavior and management, that thinking gradually changed. These views advocate the same concept that there are different types of conflicts and not all of them have to be bad and dysfunctional. There are three thoughts as and how we have evolved to different generations. They are as follows. 1. Traditional view 1930s-1940s. The traditional view on organizational conflict is the earliest of the trio. It was first developed in the late 1930s and early 1940s, with the most linear and simple approach towards conflict. According to the traditional view, any conflict in an organization is outright bad, negative, and harmful. Although conflicts are of different types, the traditional view only sees conflict as dysfunctional and destructive. It suggests that organizational conflict must be avoided by identifying the malfunctioning callus. Moreover, the traditional view on organizational conflict identifies poor communication, disagreement, lack of openness and trust among individuals, and the failure of managers to be responsive to their employees' needs as the main causes and reasons of organizational conflict. The traditional view is the early approach to conflict which assumed that all conflict was bad and to be avoided. The conflict was treated negatively and discussed with such terms as violence, destruction, and irrationality to reinforce its negative implication. The conflict was a dysfunctional outcome, resulting from poor communication, lack of transparency and trust between people, and the failure of managers to be responsive to the necessities and aspirations of their employees. 2. Human relations view 1950s-1980s. The human relations view dominated the conflict theory from the late 1940s through the mid-1970s. The human relations view argued that conflict was a natural occurrence in all groups and organizations. Since conflict was inevitable, management should accept the conflict. This theory says that conflict is avoidable by creating an environment of goodwill and trust. But still conflicts are bound to happen due to differences in opinions, faulty policies and procedures, lack of cooperation, allocation of resources which will lead to distortion and blockage in communication. Accordingly, management should always be concerned with avoiding conflict if possible and resolving it soon if possible, in the interests of the organization and the individuals. 3. Interactionist view. Current view. Modern viewpoint. While the human relations view accepted conflict, the interactionist approach encourages conflict. This view is based on the belief that conflict is not only a positive force in a group but is also necessary for a group to perform effectively. This approach encourages conflict. According to it, if the group is harmonious, peaceful, and cooperative, it is prone to become static and non-responsive to the needs for change and innovation. Therefore, the group leader must allow some conflicts to happen in the group, so that the group may remain viable, self-critical, and creative. However, conflicts must be kept under control to avoid their dysfunctional consequences. The major contribution of the interactionist approach is encouraging group leaders to maintain an ongoing minimum level of conflict, enough to keep the group viable, self-critical, and creative. Thus, it becomes evident that to say conflict is all good or bad is inappropriate and naive. Whether a conflict is good or bad depends on the type of conflict. Specifically, it is necessary to differentiate between functional and dysfunctional aspects of conflict. Now let us look at the forms of interactive conflicts and see what it has to explain. Forms of interactive conflicts. There are two forms of interactive conflicts. They are as follows. Functional conflicts. Functional conflict is people in an organization or group may have their performance which they can increase and advantages in issues. Functional conflict can lead to enhances awareness of issues which people willing to solving the problem and willing to listen to others' opinion. Dysfunctional conflicts. Dysfunctional conflict is people who in an organization or group may have decreases or disadvantages in result of outcome they gain which they negotiate in the process. It consists of disputes and disagreements of individuals discouraged to improve company performances. Let us have a look at types of conflicts. Types of conflicts. To successfully manage conflict, we must first understand the ways in which conflict emerges. Conflict in teams can be broken down into three broad types: task, relationship, and process. Task conflict. This involves disagreements about the content and/or outcomes of the team's task. For example, consider the diverse perspectives a neuroscientist, engineer, and microbiologist might bring to the table when trying to find a cure for a rare brain trauma. They will likely discuss what that cure, or outcome, might be, and almost certainly their diverse perspectives would cause disagreements among them. Low to moderate of this type of conflict is functional. Relationship conflict. Conflicts of this type center on disagreements stemming from interpersonal issues within a team. Consider the brain trauma research team mentioned above, only this time, the team includes a member who has outright belittled others' ideas in the past. Rather than focusing on the content of suggestions and ideas, they flatly suggest their peers' thinking is stupid or irrelevant without showing it due consideration. All interactions between this individual and others will likely be rife with disagreements. Almost always dysfunctional. Process conflict. This entails disagreement about how tasks will be accomplished. Think again of the brain trauma research team. Now, they've come into conflict over how to distribute various administrative tasks among the team. Specifically, they can't agree on how final decisions will be made, who has final decision rights, or who will track minutes during their meeting. This is a team in conflict over process. Low levels of this type are functional. Process of conflict. The process is a 5-stage process. Stage 1: potential opposition and incompatibility. The first step in the conflict process is the presence of conditions that create opportunities for conflict to develop. These causes or create opportunities for organizational conflict to rise. They need not lead directly to conflict, but one of these conditions is necessary if the conflict is to surface. Communication. Different words, connotations, jargon, insufficient exchange of information and noise in the communication channel are all antecedent conditions to conflict. Too much communication, as well as too little communication, can lay the foundation for conflict. Structure. In this context, the term structure is used to include variables such as size, the degree of specialization in the tasks assigned to group members, jurisdictional clarity, members/goal compatibility, leadership styles, reward systems, and the degree of dependence between groups. The size and specialization act as forces to stimulate conflict. The larger the group and the more specialized its activities, the greater the likelihood of conflict. Tenure and conflict are inversely related. Personal variables. Certain personality types, for example, individuals who are highly authoritarian and dogmatic, lead to potential conflict. Another reason for the conflict is the difference in value systems. Value differences are the best explanations of diverse issues such as prejudice, disagreements over one's contribution to the group and rewards one deserves. Stage 2: cognition and personalization. Conflict must be perceived by the parties to it. Whether or not the conflict exists is a perception issue, the second step of the conflict process. If no one is aware of a conflict, then it is generally agreed that no conflict exists. Because conflict is perceived does not mean that is personalized. Conflict is defined perceived conflict, the place in the process where the parties decide what the conflict is about, and emotions play a major role in shaping perception. Emotions are expressed felt conflict. It is the felt level when individuals become emotionally involved that parties experience anxiety, tension, or hostility. Stage 3 Intentions. Intentions are decisions to act in a given way. Intentions intervene between people's perception and emotions and their overt behavior. Dimension of conflict handling using 2 dimensions: cooperativeness, the degree to which one party attempts to satisfy the other party's concerns, and assertiveness, the degree to which one party attempts to satisfy his or her concerns. 5 conflict handling intentions can be identified. 5 conflict handling intention. There are 5 conflict handling intentions. 1. Competing, I win, you lose. When one person seeks to satisfy his or her interests regardless of the impact on the other parties to the conflict, he is competing. The competition involves authoritative and assertive behaviors. In this style, the aggressive individual aims to instill pressure on the other parties to achieve a goal. It includes the use of whatever means to attain what the individual thinks is right. It may be appropriate in some situations, but it shouldn't come to a point wherein the aggressor becomes too unreasonable. Dealing with the conflict with an open mind is vital for a resolution to be met. 2. Collaborating, I win, you win. A situation in which the parties to conflict each desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all the parties. In collaborating, the parties intend to solve the problem by clarifying differences rather than by accommodating various points of view. Collaborating aims to find a solution to the conflict by cooperating with other parties involved. Hence, communication is an important part of this strategy. Collaborating individuals aim to come up with a successful resolution creatively, without compromising their satisfaction. 3. Avoiding, no winners, no losers. A person may recognize that a conflict exists and want to withdraw from it or suppress it. Avoiding included trying to just ignore a conflict and avoiding others with whom you disagree. In this approach, there is withdrawal from the conflict. The problem is being dealt with through a passive attitude. Avoiding is mostly used when the perceived negative end outweighs the positive outcome. In employing this, individuals end up ignoring the problem, thinking that the conflict will resolve itself. It might be applicable in certain situations but not in all. Avoidance would mean that you neglect the responsibility that comes with it. The other individuals involved might think that you are neglecting the problem. Thus, it is better to confront the problem before it gets worse. 4. Accommodating, I lose, you win. The willingness of one partying a conflict to place the opponent's interest above his or her own. Accommodation involves having to deal with the problem with an element of self-sacrifice. An individual set aside his concerns to maintain peace in the situation. Thus, the person yields to what the other wants, displaying a form of selflessness. It might come as an immediate solution to the issue, however, it also brings about a false manner of dealing with the problem. This can be disruptive if there is a need to come up with a more sound and creative way out of the problem. This behavior will be most efficient if the individual is in the wrong, as it can come as a form of conciliation. 5. Compromising, you bend, I bend. A situation in which each party to a conflict is willing to give up something. Intentions provide general guidelines for parties in a conflict situation. They define each party's purpose. Yet people's intention is not fixed. During the conflict, they might change because of reconceptualization or because of an emotional reaction to the behavior of another party. Compromising is about coming up with a resolution that would be acceptable to the parties involved. Thus, one party is willing to sacrifice their own sets of goals as long as the others will do the same. Hence, it can be viewed as a mutual give and take scenario where the parties submit the same amount of investment for the problem to be solved. Stage 4 Behavior. This is a stage where conflict becomes visible. The behavior stage includes the statements, actions, and reactions made by the conflicting parties. These conflict behaviors are usually overt attempts to implement each party's intentions. When most people think of conflict situations, they tend to focus on stage 4. Because this is a stage where conflict becomes visible. The behavior stage includes the statements, actions, and reactions made by the conflicting parties. These conflict behaviors are usually overt attempts to implement each party's intentions. But these behaviors have a stimulus quality that is separate from intentions. As a result of miscalculations or unskilled enactments, overt behaviors sometimes deviate from original intentions. It helps to think of stage 4 as a dynamic process of interaction. Stage 5 outcomes. The action-reaction interplay between the conflicting parties results in consequences. These outcomes may be functional in that the conflict results in an improvement in the group's performance, or dysfunctional in that it hinders group performance. Functional. Increased group performance. Improved quality of decisions. Stimulation of creativity and innovation. Encouragement of interest and curiosity. Provision of a medium for problem solving. Creation of an environment for self-evaluation and change. Dysfunctional. Development of discontent. Reduced group effectiveness. Retarded communication. Reduced group cohesiveness. Infighting among group members overcomes group goals. Thus, by completing this we have covered today's topic and we will end the session here. Hope you found it informative. Thank you.